Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community CPA's 3 p.m. webinar. This is a time that we have to share resources to the business and entrepreneurial community. So we always, Thursdays are kind of our special days. We always invite a guest speaker to come and share resources and things that are relevant to business and the communities that we work with. Everyone here probably already knows us. We are Community CPA, which is a full service accounting firm. And we have a wide variety of services for businesses. So accounting, payroll, taxes, of course, and then also a different business consultation. So today's topic is on Clay and Milk, and which is a digital publication that is on Iowa tech startups and the entrepreneurial community. So we have Jake Slobe, who is the managing editor. He is here to share a bit about what they do. Jake is a graduate from the University of Iowa. And in addition to working at Clay and Milk, he helps out with Gravitate Co-working, which is based in Des Moines. And he has previously written for the Center for Global and Regional Environmental Research, Iowa Journalist, and the Daily Iowan. So welcome, Jake. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks you, and thanks for the introduction, Catherine. Like she said, my name is Jake Slobe. I'm the editor of Clay and Milk. I've been the editor of that publication for about 3.5 years now. So excited to share a little bit about what we do with all you guys. And yeah, I want this to be conversational, so I'm going to go through a brief presentation here and kind of speed through that, and then happy to spend the rest of the time answering any questions you might have. So.
Perfect. So I am going to share screen. Just let me know when you want me to advance it. So.
Okay, yeah, you can just go ahead to the perfect. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know what Clay and Milk is, like Catherine said, we are an online publication that covers all things related to entrepreneurship, tech, and startups throughout the state of Iowa. So we provide daily news coverage, and we're really the only publication within the state that's kind of specifically focused on that. And then in addition to like news coverage, we also have a lot of online resources for our entrepreneurs that you can kind of access through our website. Yes, and since 2018, we have been owned by Jeff Wood at Gravitate Co-working. You can go ahead and go to the next slide there. So a little bit about how we started. We were founded at the end of 2016 by my boss, Jeff, and by Ben Milne. And at that time, there really wasn't a lot of news coverage surrounding the startup community. I think at that time, the Register and the Gazette both kind of discontinued their innovation beat within kind of the same 3-month period. And at the same time, a publication called Silicon Prairie News had kind of dropped the amount of coverage they were doing as far as covering activity in Iowa. So Jeff and Ben kind of stepped in to fill that gap in late 2016 and started Clay and Milk. About 1.5 years after that, Ben ended up leaving the publication to focus solely on Douala. And that was around the same time I was brought on editor in 2018. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And here's a quick kind of quick and dirty breakdown of the types of stories we tell and kind of how often we tell them. So the kind of core of our news coverage is startup profiles, and those are usually our bigger feature stories that are specifically focused on a company that's doing new innovative stuff. It's usually early stage companies, and the types of companies that bigger publications around the state might not take the time to cover. We also will cover anything related to capital. So that can be investment rounds, that can be state funding, that can be SBAR grants, things like that. We have a quarterly investing in Iowa report that kind of rounds up all the investments that were made that quarter and kind of does a report of those. We have do a decent amount of event coverage. So there's a bunch of fests throughout the state that will go and cover those and panels and things like that. And then a good chunk of our news is just breaking news types announcements. So anytime companies have updates or make new big hires, have new products, things like that, accelerator cohort announcements. And then we also have guest posts that people can submit through our site. So you can go ahead to the next slide there. And in addition to news coverage, we have multiple events that we've created over the years for the startup community. One of those is the Startup Tech Crawl. And the tech crawl is pretty much what it sounds like. It's basically a pub crawl, but instead of touring pubs, you're kind of touring tech spaces throughout a specific community. So, so far to date, we've held 2 of those. One was in Des Moines and one was in Cedar Rapids. And both of those were kind of really successful events. We're planning on holding another one of those this fall in Des Moines again, hopefully. So keep an eye out for that. And then another event that we started a little bit more recently is called the Startup Iowa Awards. And this is an event that we hold annually now. And basically we have several different award categories that people can nominate themselves for. And then we at Clay and Milk nominate, narrow those nominations down to finalists for each category, and then kind of send those finalists off to an independent panel of judges that'll decide on the winners. We've done that 2 times now. That's been a really cool and fun way to kind of highlight entrepreneurs around the state that have been successful. The winners of the award will end up getting a feature story about them on the publication and also a trophy. It's just kind of a cool way to highlight what they do. And we try to have kind of unique categories for that award. So some of those are non-founder employee of the year. So founders often get a lot of like the highlight and media stuff. So, but there's lots of employees within a company that are important to a company's success. So we highlight those. Student entrepreneur is of the year is another one of the cool categories that we have. So it's something to check out for sure.
Awesome. Is that online or?
Yeah, it's all online. The idea, we started during the pandemic in 2020, so it's all been virtual so far. We're thinking about next year having kind of a ceremony in-person event when we announce the winners. So hopefully
that's awesome.
Yeah. And then another resource that we provide on the website is the Clay and Milk Job Board. So it's basically what it sounds like. It's a place where Iowa startups and early stage companies can come and post jobs for free. Those are seen by our audience typically, who are kind of already interested in startups. So it's kind of a good connection there. And we'll often include some of those jobs in our daily newsletter that goes out. So it's just more eyes on job openings that those companies had. And I think to date, we've had a little over 600 jobs submitted through the job board since we opened it a couple of years ago. So
wonderful. So for those, if are there any qualifications in terms of types of companies that
we don't we should probably like define some exact parameters. We do kind of have qualifications. So if like principal or something submits a job, usually we won't like take those, just because it's kind of the idea is to focus on smaller companies that have a little bit more difficulty getting word out about job openings that they have. But yeah, that's a good question, and it's probably something we should more specifically define at some point.
Yeah, awesome. This is great.
Yeah. And then a project that we're in the process of working on right now that just started a few months ago is called the Iowa Innovation Dashboard. And that's something we're partnering with the Greater Des Moines Partnership on. And basically it's going to be like an online dashboard / report of what we think are meaningful metrics within the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Iowa. And it's just a good way of tracking those metrics and growth and funding. That way entrepreneurial leaders can kind of take that data and do what they will with it. But yeah, that's in the works. So a little bit about how we are currently funded. So the vast majority of our funding comes from sponsorships from organizations and companies throughout the state. Our most popular sponsorship is our newsletter sponsorship, which is basically an ad insert in our newsletter. We have a daily newsletter that goes out 5 days a week, Monday through Friday mornings, to a couple thousand people. And so that's our main type of sponsorship. But we also have more specific series type sponsorships. So we have an Investing in Iowa sponsorship that I mentioned earlier. That's kind of that quarterly roundup / report of investment activity throughout the state, and that's sponsored by ISA Ventures over in Cedar Rapids. We have an EdTech sponsorship that's just a series of stories that are focused on EdTech companies throughout the state. We have a sponsorship we're working on right now that's highlighting companies in the Cedar Valley. I'm actually in Cedar Falls right now working on some of those stories. And then the Innovation Dashboard I just mentioned is partially partnered by the Greater Des Moines Partnership there. And then we also, the events I mentioned also bring in some of our funding. And as of right now, we're about 85% self-funded, with the rest of that funding kind of coming from Gravitate.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And a little bit about future goals for the publication. So like I just mentioned, our goal is to become self-funded and be able to kind of grow on our own and not rely on Gravitate. We're kind of on track to do that by the end of this year, which is exciting. And then more coverage of the entire state. Right now, a lot of our coverage is in the Des Moines Ames area and the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City area. A lot of that's for obvious reasons, just because that is where the bulk of startup activity is happening in the state, but there are things happening all throughout the state that we want to do a better job of kind of going and finding. More guest posts is a large goal of ours. I think I had mentioned in that slide earlier, right now it's about 5% of our posts. We want to increase that and really have Clay and Milk become a hub where people can share their ideas and stuff.
Okay,
And then
what are some of the guest posts in the past, like what topics?
it can really, we try to make it pretty broad. So Eric Engelman has done a lot of guest posts for us about like his experience building NuboCo and his thought perspective as like an investor running ISA Ventures. We've had multiple startup founders write guest posts just on what their particular experiences. But yeah, the idea is we want to make that kind of broad as possible and make Clay and Milk not just a news site that is the core of what we are, but we also want it to be a community hub where people within the community can come share their ideas and thoughts and opinions. So
Awesome.
try to make it pretty broad. And then, yeah, last goal for the publication is to kind of hire on another reporter at some point, just so we can kind of keep expanding our overall coverage. Yeah, I think, yeah, like I said, it was a pretty quick presentation, so that's our last slide there, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, thank you. I am trying to make, as my screen stop sharing?
Yeah, you're good. I can see you now.
Okay.
Not sure, screen sharing on my end anyway.
Okay, perfect. I was trying to switch back. Okay, so in terms of questions now, anybody who is on are welcome to drop in the chat or in the Q&A box. Any questions that they have about Clay and Milk or about any initiatives that are coming up. But I will otherwise ask some questions.
Sure,
so what are some of the most common types of startups that you cover and that exist in Iowa?
Yeah, so a lot of the startups that exist within the state fall into like a couple different industries. Here in central Iowa, there are a lot of agricultural startups for obvious reasons, but particularly in like the Ames and Des Moines area, you see a lot of ag startups coming out of Iowa State University. They have a really good ag program there. So there's a good chunk of those. Also here in central Iowa, there are a lot of startups really coming out of the insurance industry. Des Moines is a big kind of hub for insurance companies. And then within the past 3 or 4 years, we've had the Global Insurance Accelerator and Broker Tech Ventures really kind of even grow upon that more. So Des Moines really become a hub for insurance companies. And then lastly, I would say there are a lot of cool innovations happening in the medical and like health tech industries down in Iowa City and Coralville area with their hospital and the research that's like happening at the University of Iowa. So those are probably the big 3 as far as those are what I see the most, I would say.
Awesome. So we do have a question. How do you sign up for the newsletter? Can
it's very simple. There's just a link to it on, if you go to clayandmilk.com, right up at the top, there's a newsletter tab. All we ask is your email address, so we don't ask your name and last name, all that stuff. I just need your email address, and then you'll be all signed up and be getting that every morning. And I can, at some point, I will put that link in the chat here. So get a little easier on you.
Yeah, thank you. If you could drop that for, I think you have to switch it over to everyone to not, were you able to put it in?
I think so. Yeah, should be there.
I think you just, hold on. There we go. So another person with a nod for Situational Awareness LLC asks how they can make first point of contact to present their business to you for consideration. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so we're a pretty small publication. So if you want to reach out to me at jake@clayandmilk.com, you can email me directly. We also have there's a space on our website where if you just click contact us, there's a tab where you can reach out to us as well. Both of those will go to the same inbox, which is mine. I'm happy to look at that and consider stories. So
Awesome. Thank you. So I think you've talked a little bit about this, but how does your publication differ from other local or niche publications that are available?
yeah, so it's a good question. And because we're a small publication, and because we cover like a specific topic, we are very community centric. And I think because of that, readers are typically just kind of inherently a little bit more interested in the subject matter and a little bit more loyal to the publication than the reader of like a large paper like the Register. And that's not a dig at the Register, they're just writing a broader topic of subjects and stuff. So I think because of that, it kind of allows us to write a little bit more in depth with our stories, and we're kind of writing about a community from within a community. It's kind of like how I phrase it. So I think it gives us a little bit more flexibility there.
Awesome. So I know you talked briefly about the Iowa Innovation Dashboard project. Do you have any more information about that, or how somebody can follow updates on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a project we've been working on the partnership for about 3 months now, and we're in the process of kind of gathering all that data. Because it's our first time putting it out, we're still kind of in the learning process of that. But the goal right now is to have like that report and dashboard all live and launched by mid-May. So
Okay.
right now we are kind of wrapping up conducting like a big Iowa founder survey that's surveying a bunch of founders throughout the state, getting their ideas, thoughts, and perceptions, and ideas about like the startup community here in Iowa. So that's going to be part of the metrics from the dashboard. But beyond that, there's going to be a lot of other metrics that we're including in there. Things like the success of companies that have gone through accelerators, venture capital raise, state funding, what's the startup density within our state, what's the diversity within like startups, things like that. So yeah, it's an exciting project, and the goal is kind of trying to think of how to best word this, just with giving like entrepreneurial leaders and organizers the right data to make good decisions to kind of expand the community. So
awesome. So will that end up being on the partnerships website or on
it'll be its own independent website, but I think we'll probably have links to it from our site and theirs. So
okay, awesome. So plans for 2022, I know you mentioned some of those different things like the dashboard and trying to be more self-sustaining.
Sure.
And I know you mentioned, trying to get another reporter as well. So.
Yeah, so we've got a couple other things in the works as well. So one of the exciting things that we're going to be announcing soon, actually, I think we're probably going to be announcing this next week, is that we're going to be launching our first ever annual print magazine later this fall. So we'll be announcing that next week and looking for advertisers and people who want to contribute. And that's something we're excited about. I think it's going to be a good way of getting founders and investors to kind of write their opinions through the magazine. And it's just another avenue for us to kind of report on what we do. So that's one of the things we've got going on. I know I mentioned long-term, we're planning on bringing on another reporter, but in the meantime, we will probably be bringing on 1 to 2 like student interns this fall to kind of help us with Eastern Iowa coverage. So that's something we're excited about. Other than that, yeah, like the innovation dashboard is something we're heads down in right now. So lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, awesome. I am based in Eastern Iowa, so if you want to
connect
those interns to me,
yeah, absolutely.
we have to work together. Yeah. Okay. Overall or general thoughts on the Iowa startup community?
Oh gosh, yeah. So I've been in this role for about 3.5 years now and didn't know much about the startup community before starting here, but just in that short amount of time, I think the community has really started to take off and is a lot different than it was a few years ago. When I started, I think there were 2 startup accelerators in the state, and now there's 6 that I can think of off the top of my head. So that's really exploded. When we started tracking and like measuring investment activity in 2018, rounds of more than $1 million were pretty rare and like really highly celebrated when they happened. And now they're much more commonplace. I've written about 2 that happened this week alone. So it's become something that's common within the ecosystem, which is really good. And then universities have really, just in the last 3 years, I think really begun to like embrace the importance of entrepreneurship and done a better job about providing resources and curriculum around entrepreneurship. So that's all really cool things that are happening. But with all that being said, I think there's still a long ways to go in ways that different people within the startup community around the state can be more collaborative. So it's been cool to see the progress over the last few years, but I think there's a lot more to be done. So
yeah, for sure. So any comments on, or thoughts on how COVID has changed the entrepreneurial community?
That's a good question. I think we're just starting to see, I think a lot of people are going to be more interested in entrepreneurship and are, I think the long-term effect of COVID on just entrepreneurship in general is going to be that people are going to be very interested in starting and doing their own things. And I think that's really going to spur that. So I don't know if that's a great answer to your question, but.
Yeah. So somebody asked if you can please take a moment to describe the venture funds. They were looking at your website. I was looking for the history behind the definition of venture funds.
So venture funds typically, at least it means companies that are taking in capital from like a specific venture capital firm for equity versus like state funding where companies either getting like a loan or a grant. So that's typically how we've defined it. I don't know if that answer the question. Let me know. If not, I have to further clarify.
Yeah. So yeah, they're typically investors that are looking to help with the startups, right?
Yeah. Usually for equity. Usually happen. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So final things, any final thoughts and best ways to stay updated with the Clay and Milk news?
I don't think I have any final thoughts other than thanks for having me. It's been good to share news about what we do. And the best way to keep up with what we do is definitely just by subscribing to that newsletter. It can be hard to remember to go to a news site every day. So by doing that, it's just straight to your inbox and you don't have to remember about it anymore. Other than that, you can also follow our social media accounts to kind of keep up with what we're doing. If you have an early stage company that's hiring, we'd love to, or just an early stage company that kind of wants some coverage, we'd love to hear from you and potentially do a story on you. Or, just love to chat. So
perfect. Sorry, one last question.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you have recommendations for people who want to become involved in Iowa crowdfunding?
There are a couple angel funds that are kind of hard to penetrate, but there's also like a new program called Kiva Iowa. And that's basically what you're describing. It's kind of crowdfunding loans for entrepreneurs. And that's a program that Nuboco is running, and they've been running for about 6 months to a year now. And I think it's had a lot of success. So I would check out Kiva Iowa.
Awesome. Any other resources regarding crowdfunding that you know of?
So if you go to clayandmilk.com, we have there's a tab called resources right at the top. And within that, there is like a list of funds in Iowa. Some of those are angel investors that are like that work as kind of community group type of funding, but yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and for
thank you.
taking time to answer questions. So I put your contact in the chat. So
yeah, like
please,
I said, anyone who wants to reach out, please do so.
Awesome. All right. Well, you have a great day, Jake.
Yeah,
and
you too.
Thank you,
thank you so much.
for
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.